it was the first working group funded in 2011. And later after, 1 year later, we organized our first activity as a satellite workshop of Eurosense in 2012 in Bern. So far, the group has 58 members, and we hope that this figure will probably increase after today. But the important thing is that the participants of this group are all from very different backgrounds and countries. We have participants from 13 different countries in Europe, and participants are really, members are very involved in the working group activity. As you can see in the figures, most of them come from Spain, Italy, and France. And well, it's a very diverse participation. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of both coordinators of this working group, Mario Zanoni from Italy and Pachi Perez Lortondo from Spain, that have been a key factor to support and to allow the working group activity to continue. Well, now it's the turn to Mario and Pachi to take the role of coordinating the working group. I hope that you will enjoy this activity. And well, I invite you, if it's your first time visiting the E3S website, I invite you to have a look at the different activities that are in the web. Okay, Mario.
Thank you, Carolina.
Okay, thank you. Now it's my turn. I will tell you something about the activity of the E3S group, of our work group. Leona, if you can put my first slide, please. Okay, then the next. Okay, so this group was born following a proposal of Erminio Monteleone that who asked me and Pachi if we want to organize an activity for the PDO inside the E3S. And the birth of the group was at the time of the foundation of E3S in Florence, 10 years ago. And the debut was the first seminar in Bern in Eurosense 2012. We have the lecture done from people from different countries, state of the art of the sensory analysis PDO in Europe, how to define sensory typicity in PDO wine, an employer of sensory analysis in PDO control, the case of Idiazabal cheese, sensory analysis and economic reward of PDO cheese, the case of Trentin Gran, and do consumer recognize sensory quality of PDO product. The next. So after that, we decided that there was two areas of interest inside the group. So some members were very interested in the accreditation, the official control of the PDO according to the EU regulation. And for this reason, we created a subgroup called method and accreditation. And another subgroup was created, the consumer, and the aim was to understand consumer perception of the PDO. But it was clear that the two coordinators were much more interested in method and accreditation than in consumer. Also, if they have also experience with consumer, but at this time, the need was to prepare something useful in the entire Europe for the problem of the method and accreditation. The next. Okay, at that time, there was lack of bibliography on the subject, and so we decided to carry out investigation about the situation of the sensory analysis of PDO in Europe. You know that the EU regulation was the 2081 and now the 1151. And the regulation provided the PDO have a specification with an organoleptic description. And the control body that should check whether the product corresponds to the indication of the specification has to check also the quality of the sensory control. But in many cases, the organoleptic verification is carried out by an inspector. But in some cases, sensory analysis was used. So this was the theme of the survey that we did in 2013 in order to understand who used sensory analysis and which method. The next. So now, just to give you an idea, before the survey result, I want to show you this map that I have prepared in 8 years ago, and it represents the number of PDO in relationship with the surface of a country. So the more dark the color, the more intense is the PDO presence. And you can see that it's a south, the interest is mostly in the south of Europe. So the next one, Eliona, please. So you can roughly organize 3 areas in Europe. The E, the southern countries with a strong gastronomic tradition, interest in taste, and in local product. The B, northern countries, interest in health, nutritional characteristic, and in local products. And the C, eastern country, rather new to the concept, but also there a strong interest in local products. So everyone was interested in local products. That was the only common point of our group. And this is also possible to understand the interest, seeing the membership of our group. They are mostly from southern countries. The next. So, for instance, I have done a small research about the Italian PDO who use sensory analysis and their economic relevance. So only 2, the Parmigiano Reggiano and the balsamic vinegar of Modena, have an international relevance, and mostly are national or even local relevance. And in this case, it is the local authority that give economic support to perform the sensory analysis, because normally these are small producer, small organization of a small producer, and they don't have enough money to pay for the correct sensory analysis. So in this case, very often the local government helps these people with an economic reward. The next, Eliona. Okay, the result of the survey shows, for instance, that in every country you have small differences in organization, size of the panel, scorecard, panel training, and reason to use or not to use the sensory analysis. So in Italy, it is done by group of tasters controlled by control bodies. In France, there are the PDO organization, but they are controlled not by the control body, but from an organization of the ministry, the INAO. In Spain, the task is done by the Consejo Reguladores, the PDO organization. The size of the panel is rather similar, and you have a different scorecard, but normally there are a QDA or a scale or in some cases also on only defect recognition and quality score. The panel training is done, and the reason of use or not use is the accreditation. Always in Spain, in Italy, in France, this is always mandatory by the INAO, by the ministry. So the next, Leona. Okay, for the activity, of course, the method and accreditation publish the guideline, and Pachi later will explain the contents of the guideline. But now some words about the activity of consumer subgroup. We have done a test with consumers from 4 countries, comparing PDO and not PDO cheeses on every country and changing it in the different countries. So this was published this year, and we found, of course, that consumers in every nation were able to distinguish between PDO and not PDO in their own country. And the ability to identify sensory quality depends on the familiarity of the product. That was also obvious. The next, Leona. Then we have done a rather large survey in 6 years ago, 900 consumers in 6 different countries, and we have found that the European PDO logo is not very well known, mostly, and it was known only, relatively well known only in Southern Europe. The consumer consider the PDO products expensive but safe, and 70% of respondents say they are willing to pay more than for the PDO than for similar product. We have done also a second survey focusing on the perception of the European PDO logo on more than 1,000 people with 3 word association. And we have found that the words that come to mind when looking at the logo are sun, Europe, and stars. But also in brilliance has emerged, and in Finland, communism, probably because the logo has a red background. For Italy, Spain, and France, the logo has positive connotation, while for Finland, negative. The product that is associated with the PDO concept that's interesting is cheese in Italy, France, Great Britain, and Finland, wine in Spain, pumpkin in Austria, and Black Forest ham in Germany. So the more common product that that people can think when they think to PDO. Okay, the next. Okay, and then 2 years ago, it was done a survey that was for me very important. So the idea, I have found that in Europe there are many sensory competition. For instance, the International Cheese Award. They have are very important also for the media. But very often such competition are organized in very amatorial way, so not considering the proper sensory rules in order to have consistent results. So we have done a small survey in 4 countries, and I received 16 questionnaires. And the results are that these testing competitions are organized by local authority or producer consortia. The panelists are expert in sensory analysis or product expert. The annual periodicity was once a year. Quality score or complaint score, the total number of tastes tasted by the individual judge range from 11 to 50. In each testing session, the product tested by the individual judge vary from 2 to 20. The judge have sensory training. The validity of checked data is done in less than half of the case. So if you consider that the judge can taste in a session between 2 and 20 samples, you ask yourself if it is possible that this judge works properly. So this survey reveals ample room for improvement. Also considering that this competition have a certain media and promotional diffusion. Okay, Eliana, I think that was the last one. Thank you for attention. And now I think is the time of Pachi to present the guideline. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mario. I would like to start by thanking all of you for participating in the webinar. Next slide, please, Jonah. The first question I would like to ask her is why it's important for PDOs to apply sensory analysis. Sensory analysis is an essential tool to characterize the sensory complexity and specificity of the product. I think that producers should promote studies to know the effect of genetic, environmental, and technological factors on sensory properties of this product. This knowledge is key to get an objective of the PDOs that is to help consumer by giving them information on the specific nature of the protected products. We think that if producers do not promote the use of sensory analysis, it becomes difficult to recognize the appropriate characteristic of the PDO products. And here we have a risk of this product become similar to other generic products of the same category. So from the point of view of the official sensory control, that is one of the applications of sensory analysis in PDOs, sensory characterization also is a previous mandatory stage to establish appropriate sensory description in European regulation. Next. But regarding the official sensory control, why it's important a guideline for this official sensory control of PDO in Europe? It's true that evaluating today the sensory compliance of PDO products is a difficult task for PDOs because there are not standard methods for such activity. The number of scientific publications on the subject is very scarce. In addition, currently today in Europe, there are very different sensory practices, so harmonization is really necessary. In consequence, the aim of these guidelines has been to establish criteria for the development of methodology for the official sensory control of PDO food products and wines. Next, please. The content of the guidelines is to divide it into two parts. The part one takes a reference the European accreditation document as basic reference, as a structure of the guidelines. This document of European accreditation interprets the application or requirement of the ISO 70025 standard in sensory analysis laboratories. In this part one, I will refer only to qualification of the panel leader. I think this is very important, that, and general aspect that any method must take into account at least. The second part includes 3 annexes. Here only I will refer the way for the introduction of the sensory analysis in PDO, official control, some examples of methods applied to specific products, and the last question related to how to write the sensory specification of a PDO product in the European registration. Next, please. Well, regarding the qualification of the panel leader, he should be trained in sensory analysis, but also in the specific sensory characteristics of the PDO product. It's not enough to train in sensory analysis. We can find here 4 different situations. First situation is the candidate with previous experience in sensory testing, but not in PDO products. In this case, a specific training for sensory evaluation of PDO product is necessary. The objective here is this panel leader reach to be able to train the sensory assessor for identify key attributes and defects in the product, to discriminate or to differentiate among complete and acceptable and unacceptable samples, and to understand, very important, difference between hedonic pleasantness and typicity. In second case, are the candidate with a specific training in PDO, but not in sensory testing. For that, is a formation in sensory evaluation is key. Well, relevant courses is necessary, organized, for example, for recognized societies, as the E3S, for example. Today, with exception in Italy, I think in United Kingdom, there are non-officially recognized standards to acknowledge the professionalism of individual sensory panel staff. Well, the other 2 possibilities, a person with previous experience in sensory testing and also in a specific PDO product, in this case, only needs to increase his experience within the test method. A case not recommended is the person that neither previous experience in PDO nor in sensory analysis. Next, please. It is possible to apply to PDO control different sensory methods, but any method used must include at least the following aspect. It is important to define the sensory attribute and establish appropriate evaluation procedures of this attribute. The ordinal evaluation of the attribute according to the ordinal perception in the scorecard. Procedures to evaluate sample in the same way among all the assessors. The preparation and survey consistent of the samples, order of the presentation, the number of samples per session, number of assessors, particular environment condition and materials, statistical treatment and expression of the results, and also the attribution of compliance. But that is not a question of the panel, but it's the certification body. Next, please, Yona. So, how is necessary to introduce the sensory analysis in PDOs? Well, we have the recently published ISO 20613. It's a norm commonly applied in control programs in food industry, but PDOs are quite different. While in the food industry, the quality standard is determined mainly by what the consumer perceives to be a quality product, PDO product needs particular approach for the definition of the sensory control, for the definition of the standard of quality. And for that, it's important the participation of experts on the product. That is one of the requirements important. So, to introduce the sensory analysis, first, PDO products and government institutions must consider sensory analysis as a technical activity that requires material and human resources for established sensory standards and for defining and applying systematically a reliable sensory control method for the PDO. Next, please. In this table, we see the approaches today applied in Europe for the sensory control of PDO. We could classify the methods in 2 groups. The method don't describe only defects. That kind of method is not satisfactory because it's necessary a description of the product. A method to describe product, so defect and positive attribute. In this kind of methods, we can distinguish two types of quantitative approach. An approach with a method to quantify intensity of attributes, and another method to quantify compliance score. It's the approach degree of conformity to NIST to type. Next, please. For example, the oil is an example for approach where it's evaluated the intensity of attributes. That is a method included in the European regulation for the oil. It's an official method. It is an example of approach of intensity of attributes. Next, please. The Asiago, for example, is also a case of intensity attribute approach. Both, in this case and in the oil, compliance is defined by intensity limits previously established. Next. The same approach is also applied to the Navarra asparagus, for example. In this case, after the evaluation, panel leaders transforms the intensities obtained into quality scores following the quality specification established by the PDO. Next, please. The method for evaluation of the PDO Parmigiano-Reggiano cheese employs in separate scales a quantitative descriptive sensory scorecard and a compliance score. Next. The methodological approach developed in the sensory analysis laboratory in the University of the Basque Country, applied to Ediazabal cheese or applied to Chacolí and Rioja Alavesa wines, is an example of compliance score approach where description and compliance score are integrated with the help of decision trees. In this case, PDO establishes compliance limits directly from the compliance score of the different sensory parameters evaluated. Now, yes. To finish, I'm going to refer to the last annex of the guideline. I think it's very important, this part of the guidelines, because it's how to write the sensory specification approach in European PDO registration. Now will be Lisa Gredilla. It's clear that one of the limitations identified by the accreditation body is the lack of coherence between sensory control scorecard and organic description in the regulation. With inadequate organoleptic description, it becomes difficult, even impossible, to develop a sensory scorecard for determining compliance of PDO regulation. What is necessary for that? We need the knowledge of the sensory characteristic of the product. That is evident. We need also the participation of sensory analysis professionals, not only to describe appropriately the product, also for the translation of the sensory attribute, for example, in language and another within the European Union. Next. Well, the Annex C for that includes a sample of good and bad organoleptic description, good description, the justification of the appropriate description, and how to translate the organoleptic description into measurable sensory attribute in the sensory scorecard. For a correct development of this work, we must always interact with these three questions. This term is defined. Can it be measured? Can we find sensory reference to clarify the sensory concept to the sensory assessors? Well, next. Here, I finished the presentation about the content of the guide. I thank you very much for your attention. And I will pass now to the next speaker, which is Lisa Gredilla, who is the person in charge of the Agri-Food Department of Spanish accreditation body. Please, Gredilla. Elisa.
Hello. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I want to thank to E3S to invite me to take part in this webinar. I'm really happy that this project started so long ago and in so brilliant way. I think that the guide it's going to be very useful. Next slide, please. Here I have some figures about how important is PDO and PGI products in Europe. These figures I got last week from Ambrosia, that is the web page from the European Commission. There you can find all the food products already approved, but also those that are in the way of getting, and there are still more products that get in this protected level. So up to now, there are more than 1,500 PDO PGI food products. There are 1,600 wines protected, and there are 250 spirit drinks. You already know that most of the product specifications that has all these products include the organoleptic characteristics that have to be verified by sensory analysis during the control. So since I'm an accreditation body, and since long time ago, many years ago, we asked to the scientific people from sensory analysis that a document like this will be very much appreciated, because we have the need to assess what the control bodies were doing and how they were checking that the products fulfill the requirements written in the product specification. And really, it was very difficult, as Patty mentioned before. In the guides, many of the points that we have been highlighting that we need some help with this are already there. So I think that this guide will be very helpful for not only control bodies that have to check that the products fulfill the requirements, but also the operators themselves and the assessors, and of course it will be a great help for us, for the accreditation bodies that all over Europe has to check. Yeah, okay. Next. I want to inform you also that EA has developed a document that will be soon approved. This is a new guide, the EA32, and it has the EA policy for the accreditation of certification bodies providing certification of PDO, PGI, and TSG. We think that this will help to harmonization throughout Europe. In this document, there's one question that is there, and it is very related with what we have here. It is the necessity of evaluating the sensory testing performed in the evaluation of the PDO and PGI products. So it's a part that we cannot forget in any case when we are checking that the operators fulfill the requirements of the product specification. One of the important parts in talking about PDOs and PGIs is the sensorial evaluation. So I'm happy I have been working in these two documents, this EA document and also the document with the E3S. And I think that it's good that we have there, and many people can use them. And I think that it will be easier than what we have during past years. The problems that in sensory testing, there are not standard methods in most of the cases, has been already mentioned by Patty, but it's a real issue and a very difficult one. Next, please. Patty has mentioned some of the points of the guideline that are key and give us and to the testing panel many work. That is the question related with the personnel involved in the testing of sensorial testing. And another key issue is are the test methods and their validations and their relation with the properties that are in the specification published when the regulation is approved. I think that also the examples that are in the annex are very valuable. The people can see how there is no one recipe to do the test analysis in sensory. There are many ways, and there are some examples there that can be used by the people, and I think it's going to be it can open many eyes, saying, well, there are really very different ways to solve a problem I have to check in my product, and I think that is also one of the questions of the guidelines that will help many people. And that's all. This is my last slide, and that's all from my side. And congratulations to E3S.
Thank you, Elisa. Now we pass to the next speaker, who is Fiorella Sinesio, who works in the Council for Agricultural Research and Agricultural Economy Analysis in Rome. Please, Fiorella.
Thank you, Pachi. I want to thank you, the E3S, and Pachi and Mario, who invited me to have a brief speech in this webinar. Could you pass to the next slide? Thank you. So I want to stress the importance and the usefulness of these guidelines on sensory analysis of PDO products. The guidelines have been formally designed for the bodies that oversees the official sensory control of PDO products to determine the degree of compliance with sensory characteristics included in the technical specification. We have seen that the panel have to recognize the characteristics which are desired in the product, the ones that are not desired, and they can be quantified. But of course, the guidelines are useful not only for the bodies which are in charge of controlling the PDO products. The information included in the guidelines is very important for all the sensory laboratories and panels, especially the laboratories that have been accredited and follow the ISO standard 17025, which is the current framework used to demonstrate the technical competence of the laboratories. And the guidelines offers, especially in the annexes, offer many examples of methodological approaches for the control of the PDO products to satisfy the technical requirement of the ISO standard, and so may be used as part of the evaluation of the sensory practices by the accreditation bodies. The next, please. The guidelines follow the same, we have seen that follow the same structure of the European accreditation for sensory testing laboratories, the document 4.9, which is the basic reference for sensory methods used by the accreditation laboratories, and of course used also by the technical inspectors of the accreditation bodies. But the guidelines for sensory analysis of PDO products goes beyond this document. The European accreditation document is provide general instruction for that are applicable to any products, but a document is establishing the criteria for development of the methodologies for sensory analysis for PDO food product was lacking. And so this guidelines is a very welcome document. And moreover, the guidelines can be a very useful tool to proceed towards harmonization of the sensory practices. The current sensory practices are very different in Europe. And the example applied to specific kinds of products reported in the annexes of the guidelines highlight the differences in sensory practices and the different methods applied to the PDO official control. So I think is the first step to proceed towards this harmonization of sensory practices, which is very important. The next, please. And then I want to stress, I have some comments on two important aspects that I want to stress. Particularly the first one is the qualification of panelists has been treated in the guidelines. It is very important that people who are in charge of such control of the PDO products have the correct profile. This has been largely said by PACI. It is important that they are sensory professional, but not only, they must have a good knowledge of the product. To have an objective evaluation is very important, the control of the data at the individual level and of the panel as a whole, to evaluate the performance of the panel, the internal quality, in a constant day-to-day monitoring of their performance, but also important to evaluate external quality assessment. The participation that can be done through participation in proficiency testing, inter-laboratory test. Sometimes they are not available. For some kind of products, they are not available, this proficiency testing, but the external quality assessment can done in intra-laboratory tests when the number of panelists is sufficiently high. Another aspect that I want to stress is that the PDO product have much less sensory homogeneity compared to other commercial products. There are differences between single units, maybe differences between batches, or a variation over seasons. And the quality of the results depends on the performance of the panel, but of course also it's important the homogeneity of the product. And when the product is not homogeneous, of course, there is much variability in the results. So it is important, and this homogeneity can affect the results. So it's very important to replicate the analysis of the samples in the way the replication is the only way to capture such differences and to measure the variability which is due to the product and the variability which is due to the panel. Both these aspects are very important to obtain confident results, to be sure of the results. These are my comments. I say this because I collaborate with the official body of accreditation in Italy. So I'm one of the operators that visit the laboratories. And I often I see that the laboratories have problem with to measure the qualification of panelists and to control the homogeneity of the product. I finished.
Thank you very much, Fiorella. The next speaker will be Mario Zanoni again, because Carol Raitata, unfortunately, is not today with us. So Mario, your turn.
Okay, Carol has prepared an explanation of the situation of the PDO in the United Kingdom after the Brexit. So the next, please. So basically, the system is still alive. The old system is still alive, and the government has tried to integrate the new British system with the old European system. So the geographical indication scheme protected register the product name when they are sold in Great Britain. In the European, protect products when they are sold in Northern Ireland and in the EU. All product name protected in European Union on 22 December 20 are protected under the UK and the European scheme. Next, please. There are 4 UK schemes: food, agricultural products, beer, cider and perry, wine, aromatized wine, and spirit drink. So, producer in Great Britain will need to secure protection under the UK scheme before applying to the EU scheme in order to protect a product name in Northern Ireland and the European Union. In Northern Ireland, the producer can apply to protect the product name in Northern Ireland and the European under the European Geographic Indication Scheme. They can also apply to the UK Geographic Indication Scheme to protect the product name in Great Britain. They don't need to secure UK GA protection first. So in other words, the Northern Ireland has both systems functioning. The next one, please. Also, protected food name apply to food, agricultural products, beer, cider, and perry. 3 designation, as in Europe, and the PDO specification included main physical, chemical, microbiological, organoleptic characteristics showing the product-specific character. The inspection body that conforms to the principle of the ISO 1765 standard must be named in the application. So the standard European system. The next, please. So at this time, we have 78 products in UK. For instance, Gore Salt Marsh Lamb, Dandy Cake, Laughneef Heel. Sorry for the pronunciation, but I am Italian and not British. Cornish clotted cream, Stilton blue cheese, and so on. The next one, please. So now the UK and the European Union scheme are consistent. So in this context, also our guideline should be relevant for the UK system. But it should be noted that because of the current UK PDO context, often small producer and less established producer groups, the guideline might represent aspirational best practice. That is a problem not only for UK, because we have a lot of small producers in Europe, and the sensory analysis is sometimes too expensive for this producer. So I think that's all. Next one should be the thanks. Okay, thank you. From the part.
Okay, Mario, thank you very much for your effort. Bon, the next speaker now is Quisquita Insausti, this professor of the Université Pública of Navarra in Spain. Please, Quisquita.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this webinar. Dealing with the usefulness of these guidelines, my approach will focus on fresh meat. In Spain, around 10% of the products under a PDO or a PGI are fresh meat. That is, somewhere around 19-20 products are fresh meat. Most of them come from the beef, but lamb is also very, very important. So the economic impact of the PDOs is important in fresh meat. Next, please. In this context, here we can see the production flow chart of beef, but a similar pattern could be applied to lamb as well. These livestock systems are based on local breeds, reared under semi-extensive systems in high nature value lands like mountains and valleys, and thus they are sustainable regarding the environment, the economic impact or profit of the activity, and also regarding society, because they lead to the fixation of people in the rural areas. So in general, PDOs include the specifications regarding breed, feeding systems, age at weaning, slaughter age, aging time of the meat, etc. But organoleptic quality is not often included in this type of products. The next, please. Thus, we have a specific product produced in a specific way, but we don't have a defined sensory profile that can be certified by a sensory panel. So there's no way to distinguish this type of meat from their industrial competitors. And as a consequence, PDOs and PGIs need to establish standard methods for the sensory evaluation of the products. So PDOs and PGIs have very important tools for fresh meat from two standpoints, from my point of view. The first one is that PDOs and PGIs guarantee to consumers that the production systems are sustainable. And that's a major issue at the moment regarding the meat sector, but also very important for the whole production sector. And besides, introducing sensory specifications can help producers communicate the different quality of the products to consumers. And for that, we need a sensory guide and some methodologies, like the ones gathered in the present guidelines that we are studying today. So I find that this guide is very interesting and very important, and it will be very helpful. And just to finish, I would like to congratulate the E3S and Mario Ampaci for the great job they've done with these guidelines. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Kiskitsa. The last speaker will be Alessandra Bendini, also professor, but in this case from the University of Bologna, Italy. Please, Alessandra.
Thank you, Pachi, for introducing me. And thank you also, E3S, for invitation to present briefly the case of PDO, PGI, extra virgin olive oil that has been considered in the guideline. Please, the next slide. Okay. In the specific case of PDO or PGI extra virgin olive oil, many normative references exist for sensory methodology. It's possible to consult and download the documents, for example, in the site of International Olive Council, IOC. The sensory methodology is known as IOC panel test and has been applied with a legal purpose since the 19th in Europe to classify olive oil samples in a specific quality grade. For example, extra virgin or virgin olive oil that are directly suitable for human consumption. Over the years, the methodology has undergone many revisions, and now the updated profile sheet requests the evaluation of high intensities of attributes using a continuous 10 centimeter scale, as previously said by Patsy. And moreover, the median value related to the intensity of each attribute is calculated. In 2005, the IOC released a document on the method to be used for sensory assessment of extra virgin olive oil for granting the status of denomination of origin. And this document contains a list of possible defined descriptors to be used to select, applying the round table methodology, up to 10 of the more appropriated attributes for the designation of origin and incorporating them into the profile sheet of the method. Assessors must be supervised by panel leader for correct recognition of intensities of perceived attributes, and all the activity of the panel has to be managed, to be checked according to technical guidelines and ISO norms. The next slide, thank you. And as it's possible to see in this slide, consulting the European Geographical Indication Register, I arranged an overview of the updated situation of the PDOs, PGIs, extra virgin olive oil in the European producing countries. Around 50% of denomination of origin have been registered before 2005, and as a product specification have not undergone revision after this date, and therefore it will be advisable an updating to the current sensory methodology and terminology. At this regard, as an example, I report in the graph the product specification of Brisighella PDO, that is one of the two PDOs of the Emilia-Romagna Italian region. This PDO has been registered since 1996, but then has been amended in 2016. And the minor revisions concerned the updating of sensory methodology, as well as some limits of chemical parameters. As a final consideration, the final consideration is also related to the need to dispose of specific reference material for a correct recognition of attributes, and also for a right evaluation of the intensities of these attributes. At now, currently, natural samples are mostly used for training the panelists, but it will be very interesting to study in depth other approaches, for example, new formulation based on vegetable extract or combination of poor food grade molecules in oil matrix. This new reference material could be shared then among panels in order to improve their performance in descriptive analysis of PDO, PGI, extra virgin olive oil. So I finish. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Why, and now we are in time, I think, for question and exchange among participants. I don't know, Jonah, if we have some questions.
Yes. I will read the questions, but if people want to ask orally, it will be great.
I think, Elena, there is also a raised hand.
Sorry?
There is also someone that raised a hand.
Ah, okay. We can start from the hand.
Yeah, it's Anna Piccinelli Serida.
Yes,
from Asturias, yes. Spain.
Anna Piccinelli, if you want to step in.
No, I see that she is not speaking, so you can read the question.
Okay. The first question is from Anna Piccinelli. Can the current regulatory councils of PDO correct to sensory description already presented in their application by appropriate descriptive profiles? The first question.
Sorry, you can read it again because I have not fully understood the question.
Yes. Can the current regulatory councils of PDO correct the sensory descriptions already presented in their applications by appropriate descriptive profiles?
Yes, I can answer. Yes, it is possible, but it is a very long process. You have to ask for a modification to the European Union in order to change something in the document, and also this is any change, also the sensory change. It is possible, but it takes a long time.
If I can add something, but based on my experience, previous experience on the PDO Brisighella extra virgin olive oil, are possible two kind of modification, major or minor request of amendment. For example, the updating of the sensory methodology or terminology are considered minor revision, minor amendment, and so in this case, the ITER is not too long. It is possible to perform, to reach a revision in not too many years.
Okay. More questions?
Yes. Anna Piccinelli, then. How can the use of appropriate descriptive profiles be justified in the official control of products currently under PDO, having generic or non-descriptive sensory specifications? I can repeat if you want.
No. The problem is if the description is not well done according to the sensoric principle of sensory analysis, you have to interpret the generic description in a specific description for a sensory analysis. So you have to change on some extent. If someone says characteristic taste, you should do a research to understand what is characteristic taste. Okay, this is an extreme case, but sometimes the description is rather generic, and it is an old description because very often the PDO have regulation. They are written in the 80s, in the 70s, and at that time they don't know what didn't exist sensory analysis in our countries. So many times the problem is a problem of interpretation. In some cases, in very rare cases, in the modern PDO, it is possible to find better description that are fit to a good sensory analysis description. I don't know if Pachi want to add something.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you. There has another question, but we have a little time. Eh?
Yes, but so I think we can go on with the last part.
Okay.
Okay, so I will share my screen and can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So
you
now,
start.
Now the conclusion and future. So the next one, Leona, please, the conclusion, next. Okay, how to use the guideline. So our aim was to make available to sensor analysts a manual of good practice, okay, good praxis, on which to be inspired once they are faced with the request to introduce sensor analysis for a PDO. So this is not a mandatory document. This is important because someone asked if this document will be mandatory inside the European Union and so on. No, that's the first step in order to harmonize the method and the system of controlling the PDO through the sensor analysis. And the guideline will also serve the inspector of the accreditation bodies as a reference document for the approach with control bodies of PDOs using sensor analysis. And this is also the other part of this work, a useful document also for the inspector of accreditation bodies, because not always they are experts in sensory analysis, but this can help them in doing properly their job. So the next one, please. Okay, now there are in Europe 2 philosophies for the PDO. So for the producer, it is extremely important to remove product with defect. And this task is often carried out by inspector. For example, in the case of Parmigiano Reggiano, Grana Padano, and Parma ham, and they cost less than a sensory panel. But these 3 PDO have the importance of 1/4 of the entire PDO money who flows in the entire Europe. And they use inspector. They are also trained to do a sensory check, relatively easy sensory check. But in this case, for instance, even using the inspector, the sensor analysis could be very useful because could validate the activity of such inspector. So in other words, okay, you use inspector, but are you sure that your inspector is very able to do this sensory work? The validation could be done, for instance, by a panel test with a proper sensory analysis. This is an example. Then the other philosophy is sensory analysis mainly allow to identify 2 things: if the product has defect and if the product has the typical characteristic prescribed by the specification. This use is much more useful than simply eliminating defective products. And that is, this use is done by the PDO who has introduced sensory analysis because they want to know better the product and not only to eliminate the defective products. That is a much more advanced vision, and I hope that will broaden over the Europe with the time. So the next time, Leona, please. Okay. Then you have to think some things very important. Now the ecological situation changes all the time. The genetic of plant of animal change, technology change, workforce change. And since most PDO, wine, cheese, seasoned meat depends on bacteria, whether these bacteria change or only decrease, it is inevitable that the product will change. And then also the specification change with the time. It is a normal process, even for a PDO. Since the change is low, the consumer has time to adapt, but this change, rather than generate defect, causes the alteration, attenuation of the typical characteristic of the traditional product. If the traditional product loses its sensory complexity, it becomes indistinguishable from its industrial competitor. But the industrial competitor will always have much lower production cost. And that's the point, a very important point. So the next one, please. So the use of sensor analysis often made to fulfill the requirement of accreditation to standard EU 1151. In the actual situation of many PDO products, sensor analysis is actually much more useful to recognize and prevent, or at least slow down, the sensory drift toward anonymous and tasteless product. And that is an extremely important thing, and very often even the producer are not aware of this problem, but this is extremely important, and for this, sensor analysis can really help. Okay, the next one, I think it would be for the future.
I just finished. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk about the future of E3S PDO Working Group. Next, please. Well, after this seminar, both Mario and me are going to stop being coordinator of this working group. So we need to find the continuity of the working group. To see the possibility of the continuity of this working group in the future, we organized a meeting the past 28th June with two main objectives. One is to decide the possible subject of work of the working group in the future, and also the person who will participate in the coordination of the group in the future. So in this meeting, we have 10 participants. Well, we have collected the proposition of about the subject to continue with the group working group. For example, Carol Raitata suggested the possibility to change the group in a sensory control group, quality control group, not only control of PDO, is quality control in general, but she has no time to become coordinator for such a group. So after also José Romero Castillo, for example, proposed to start a work for fresh vegetable which has peculiar needs. Myself commented it would be desirable to work on meat and meat product and also the product less sensory developed. This really is a proposition of Quisquicha and Sausti from the Universidad Pública de Navarra. Carolina also commented that E3S board during their last meeting proposed to broaden the PDO concept to other related concepts such as local and traditional food. Finally, myself and Mario suggested that the group could continue divided in two subgroups because we think there are interests for the method and also for the consumer. So we can continue with this subgroup within the working group of E3S. In the group method, for example, we are interested in this moment the person who want to work about vegetables, meat products, and other less sensory developed kin of products. And within the subgroup of consumer, the objective could be to investigate the attitude of the people towards the PDO and traditional local products, and also with all this information to communicate and disseminate to the society the particular characteristics of this kind of products. Regarding potential coordinator, next. In the meeting, we decide also that have desirable to have at least two coordinators. This way, two coordinator allows to divide the work among a couple of persons. Before the web meeting, Lidia Lozano from IRTA and Quisquicha and Sausti from UNA confirmed to Mario and me their participation. Quisquicha and Sausti, for example, could be one of the coordinators now, and Lydia Lozano could continue the coordination in the future renovation. After the meeting, we had also a meeting with Barbara Guggenbull and Patricia Piccinelli, both from Agroscope, and they confirm us that their participation to coordinate the working group. So we think that the continuity of the working group of E3S is possible. It's possible. So I don't have a lot of time, but perhaps it is possible Kiskich and Patricia are with us. First, I would like to thank both for the compromise to coordinate the working group in the future. Perhaps you can introduce yourself and very briefly to make know how you see to the continuity of the working group in the future. Kiskicha, for example.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Pachi, for the introduction. Yeah, when I was asked by Mario and Pachi, I was interested in working in this group, but from a coordination standpoint, I said, okay, yes, I'm interested. I really believe in PDOs. I am at the moment taking charge of one of the PDOs of the sensory analysis for Roncal cheese, for example, and my interest is to widen this to other products. For example, as I've mentioned, fresh meat, which is my research topic, fresh meat, and I see an important lack of sensory analysis for making these products, for making awareness of the difference of these products. So I'm interested in both the part of methodology and also the part of consumers, because I think that PDOs have this potential. They are already quite well known by consumers, and it's a tool that we can use in order to communicate the goodness of the products that are under these PDOs and PGIs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have also interest in fresh vegetable, no? From IRTA, for example, Roser, Romero, Del Castillo, and Lydia Lozano told us that it's interesting, the fresh vegetable also, no? In this subgroup of methods, right?
Yeah. If they are in the meeting, if they want to add anything, I think my idea is to work with the people that really want to add something to this. I cannot work. I cannot make specifications for fresh vegetables because it's not my area. But of course, anyone that has ideas, they are very welcome, and I would really love to work with. I will work with Lydia and Roser in this subject, but if anyone has any other, knows any other lack or gap in this field, please just get in contact with us, and we will work in different subgroups within the group, of course.
Okay, thank you, Kiskicha. Patricia, you are okay confirming the participation as coordinated of the working group?
Thank you, Patsy. Yes, we discussed it inside the Swiss group of the Swiss sensory group, and we said that we could imagine to give our help to coordinate and to continue this group as this Swiss sensory interest group. We found that the idea of widening the range of products to the regional local products would be a good idea. So we agreed to this, and we thought that it would be also a good thing to look for the implementation of this enormous work which was done until now with this PDO guideline. This is perhaps easier in countries like Italy Italy and Spain. Maybe it takes a little bit more work in other countries, and so to continue also on methods, on study of methods, maybe for many products, for selected products, let's say so. And we are also interested in this work, which was mentioned by Mario, on guidelines for products competitions. So these are the topics we would suggest, and of course we would like to have the ideas of the members. So perhaps just run a survey with the actual members, and see what their interests are, so that we can build up a future which is interesting for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Well, we finished, Mario?
We have a question from Anna Piccinelli. I think it was a raised hand.
No. We?
Yes.
Yeah, but it was before. I think she wrote the question in the chat.
Okay.
Okay.
There is another question, I think, at the end. Maybe Iona, I don't know if you have already. One of Maribel González Hernández. You have already considered this?
Okay.
Is it possible to modify the specification of an appellation of origin demonstrating that the sensory characteristics of wines with a trained panel of experts indicate that the characteristics have changed over time?
Yes, I think everything is possible because, as I said before, it is normal that with the time the characteristic change. So at this point, also the description has to change, and also the registration of the description has to be implemented in the European Union. So it is normal problem for a PDO was not very often not enough considered when we started with the PDO in '96, because at that time we have the idea that a PDO should be constant in the future, but no, it is not like that. The environment change, and also the environment change, and also the PDO. I don't know if you want to add something, Pachi.
No, it's normal. Yes, it's the evolution of the external factors that has an influence on the raw material, and in consequence on the final product. That is, but perhaps the change are very in very long time. No, yes. No geological time, but probably it's necessary to a lot of time to observe this modification. I see if the modifications are natural. If are not natural, that is another question.
Yes. So before closing, I want to say something on my side that has nothing to do with sensory analysis. So with this webinar, my activity will end because I'm retired since 3 years. I am retired, and then I have finished the guideline because it was our task to finish the guideline, even if I am no more active at work.
Yes, I continue in the list of people collaborating in the E3S Working Group, but not as coordinator, Kitskitsa and Patricia. Now you.
And in these 10 years, I have met a lot of nice people, and I want to thank you every one of you, and it was very nice 10 years. I will miss you, and of course I will miss also the dancing evening at Eurosense. That's my goodbye.
Thank you,
Mario,
all people.
your work and your contribution. It has been very important, the contribution of both coordinators over the activity of this working group. And we will miss you, Mario, but we can see each other anyway.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we finish here?
Okay.
Yes.
What?
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all people. See
Thank
you
you
soon.
to the
See you soon all.
coordinators and to everybody.
See you soon. Lydia.
All the speakers.
Grazie.
Grazie. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.